Role of the academic in the era of fake news. In this talk today, I wanted to revisit a piece I wrote for the Times Higher Education supplement back in August 2018, entitled "The Need to Be Both Scholar and Expert is an Urgent One." You can find it on their website searching under my name. Now, I was writing this in a Brexit context, in looking at the myriad ways that misinformation, or downright lies actually, to put none too fine a point on it, were widely used, mainly by the Leave side, it has to be said, in the run-up to the referendum campaign. Now, in so doing, I wanted to get to grips with the notion that the internet, rather than necessarily being a means to more widely distill objective, evidence-based information, could just as easily become a platform to amplify existing nonsense. After all, even the Flat Earth Society have a website. They clearly know how to, and even have a regular podcast series. There they promote their views, if you can call them that, as alternative science, and rage against what they describe as a globalarist conspiracy. In a similar fashion, the current COVID-19 pandemic has given anti-vaccination campaigners a renewed vigour in attempting to spread their dubious views. Now, whilst these groups are on the fringe, the liberating power of the internet, of course, has given them new reach. And as research into the activities of the far right has shown, highly distasteful ideas around race and class can easily be fed by such groups through social media to inveigle their way into more supposedly mainstream conversations. Yeah, in my darker moments, I find it's not too difficult to imagine an all-powerful party, that's party with a capital P, could actually charge its mathematicians to construct a dual system of astronomy, Ptolemaic and Copernican, depending on its whims. Now, of course, some of you listening to this will have picked up on the literary allusion there. And yes, of course, George Orwell, writing in his novel 1984, said as much about the ability of multimedia technology to enable an all-controlling state to impose its doublethink ideology on a captive populace and denigrate the empirical, sceptical mode of thinking. As the arch-totalitarian O'Brien, interrogating the novel's hero, Winston Smith, expounded, "The Earth is the centre of the universe. The sun and stars go round it." To which he then added, "For certain purposes, of course, that is not true. When we navigate the ocean, or when we predict an eclipse, we often find it convenient to assume that the Earth goes around the sun, and that the stars are millions upon millions of kilometres away. But what of it? What of it indeed? This flexible relationship with an objective reality, in fact, a total denigration of one, is what features the totalitarian line of thinking. Now, of course, no doubt the flat earthers and the anti-vaxxers would regard themselves as sceptical and fighting an all-controlling state. But note the key word here. My previous comment was that of the word empirical. In other words, a thought process based on amassing evidence and experimentation, controlled trials and all that. In other words, those painstaking elements of the scientific method that are built up over years of hypothesizing, testing, and exposing one's theories to what the great philosopher of science Karl Popper termed as the principle of falsification, whereby any theory worthy of the name should be able to be subject to testing its basic assumptions so as to critically assess its ability to explain reality and make useful predictions, of course. The exact opposite of axiomatic political dogma. Now we might be tempted to dismiss Orwell's dark alternative history as a literary device, purely to explore the evils of totalitarianism, rather than Orwell making an accurate prediction of the future per se. However, as the election of Donald Trump, as ongoing stories of Russian interference in Western elections come to light, and as the Brexit referendum highlighted, it's not just fringe groups that seek to exploit the power of the internet and social media to influence and manipulate public opinion, but also those in positions of considerable power. Indeed, as the columnist George Monbiot, writing in yesterday's Guardian, pointed out, micro-targeting on social media, peer-to-peer texting, and now the possibility of deep fake videos allow today's politicians to confuse and misdirect people, to bombard us with lies and conspiracy theories, to destroy trust, and to create alternative realities more quickly and effectively than any tools 20th century dictators had at their disposal. Now, it's in this context, then, that academics have had to increasingly struggle to get their voices heard. As in the social media buzz, it can be very difficult to get your points above the background static. And all too often, what passes for so-called conversations on social media are little more than that of opposing viewpoints shouting past each other, more or less openly abusively, or otherwise like-minded people agreeing with each other like a band of nodding dogs. For academics, then, there is a huge imperative to being able to put their ideas forward in the public domain in a manner that is accessible to the wider public. Thus, the traditional imperative for an academic then to publish or perish has been superseded by the need to ensure one's research is rigorous and relevant, yes, but moreover, to generate impact on the wider economy and society. I suppose to come back to a point, as we've seen in the UK government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the views of academics can be readily adopted or discarded as the political imperative shifts. You know, if you just take the simple example of reducing physical distancing requirements so as to enable a wider range of businesses to open, namely pubs, hairdressers, restaurants, despite the widespread concerns of medics and public health professionals. In such a fashion, then, has the mantra, stay home, protect the NHS, save lives, morphed into stay alert, control the virus. You know, in the realm of economics, in a similar fashion, it has been quite interesting to see how the response to the pandemic has seen a wholesale jettisoning of neoliberal orthodoxy in favour of a package of support measures, furloughing employees, for example, that the most ardent Keynesian could only have dreamt of. And for the most part, all glowingly approved by a right-wing media that would have howled in rage should any Labour government have proposed the same measures. Watch then as the Keynesian ideas that were once derided are adopted, as they are at the moment, and then discarded and derided again as what passes for normality gradually returns. Or to paraphrase from 1984 again, a lie becomes truth and then becomes a lie again. Now, I suppose for academic economists such as myself, denoting themselves as Keynesian, it can be disheartening to see one's ideas lambasted as leftist heresy one minute and then only to be adopted at times of crisis. In contrast, those professionals working in the City of London financial services sector, who are termed economists by the media, even though they might not have an economics degree, were rapidly rehabilitated in the aftermath of the 2008 global financial crisis, as economic orthodoxy reasserted itself in the guise of austerity. Now, of course, as I made the point previously in the Times I read article, that many of these individuals simply repeated conventional nostrums about free markets and their purported efficiency only exposed the fragility of their so-called expert status in failing to predict the crisis in the first place. Not, however, that it has stopped the same siren voices warning about the cost of the pandemic and that there will inevitably have to be spending cuts and or tax rises in the near future to pay for it all. Now, we come back to this point about the role of the academic in trying to cut through the bullshit, as it were. In looking at those free market views, the economic theories, often referred to as neoclassical economics, that these opinions are based on have been abused and misrepresented. But that simple, or maybe not so simple, that point simply bypasses public debate. For example, the simple claim that a wage rise will invariably generate increased unemployment in neoclassical modelling is based on a particular set of assumptions in a model referred to as a partial equilibrium approach. That is, just looking at changes in one individual market, in this case the labour market, in isolation, where the effects of a change in one variable then are analysed under the key assumption of ceteris paribus. That is, the Latin for all else being held equal. Now, if you drop the ceteris paribus assumption and explore the impact of other extraneous factors on the impact of a wage rise in the labour market, in reality, you can't separate the labour market from product markets. And so if you get an increase in aggregate demand across the economy, then the simple postulate of a wage rise is always leading to increased unemployment goes out the window. The simple mechanism here, particularly for the low paid, is if you increase their purchasing power, they buy more. That props up businesses in the economy. They see demand going up. They might actually hire more people, not less. However, right-wing politicians reel out these models selectively because they are seen by them to provide academic evidence or specious academic justification to support their free market ideology. Now, of course, the great economist and public intellectual John Maynard Keynes, writing in 1936, was all too acutely aware of this tendency by political leaders to selectively adopt their ideas. When he presently commented that madmen in authority who hear voices in the air are distilling their frenzy from some academic scribbler of a few years back. Now, as I've commented previously, you can refer back to the same article, this does bring us to an important point about the dissemination of objective knowledge rather than just opinions or propaganda. To come back to my earlier point about the power of the internet to amplify nonsense. Edward Bernays, who I think was the cousin of Sigmund Freud, is regarded as the father of public relations. And he wrote in the 1940s that propaganda could have a positive role in a democratic society by providing a plurality of guiding thoughts for the masses, as opposed to what he regarded as one stream of guiding thought in a dictatorship. But academics, of course, are defined as being credible by grounding their arguments and so-called guiding thoughts in some type of robust evidence base, or at least an internally consistent system of logical thinking and assumptions. And the key point distinguishing the academic from the polemicist then is that should the evidence change, then that would lead an academic to change their assumptions, their views. Now, of course, suffice to say, in the realm of human interaction characterised by the social sciences, separating the objective from the normative, separating facts from opinions, in other words, has been a difficult activity at the best of times. In the 21st century context of all-pervasive multimedia, the academic function of critical inquiry that I referred to earlier, that of contesting, reviewing, publishing, critically assessing one's own work, becomes ever more pressured by the need to contribute to and aid, influence public debate. However, the urgency of this in a political climate where democratic norms have increasingly come under attack demands a For academics, then, the challenge is to stay true to their basic ethical and scholarly principles, to stick it out for the long haul, as it were, and keep pushing to get their ideas out in the public domain and engage directly with the public. In terms of more prosaic reflection on my own job, I actually see that as far more important than being published in prestigious academic journals. Because in prestigious academic journals, the so-called 4-star rated journals, you're largely just talking to each other. It's entirely possible to live in an academic bubble world, the lambasted ivory tower, and not engage in the wider public discourse. And if you come back to the Brexit vote, it still does strike me in terms of the geography of the vote, to what extent university towns were Remainer islands, surrounded by a lead voting sea. So, to me, if you want to challenge public perceptions, you have to break down those barriers. And that necessitates a focus away from simply doing research for its own sake to one of more direct civic engagement. So, it really is about to push to get your ideas out into the public domain, engage directly with the public, and try and shape and lead public opinion, not simply to cower in the face of it. So, in conclusion, as I noted in my Times High Read article at the time, as the Australian pop band In Excess sang in the early 1990s, I was thinking, got the feeling, the gift you give is going to last forever. Thank you.